So today, as you see, we have a somewhat different schedule than we usually have Erev Shabbos. I was somewhere else and I gave a shiur this morning. So the sugya we will be briefly discussing today is one of the most widely discussed sugyas in Shas, and that is Shlichos b'mitzvos. What does it have to do with this week's parsha? Kein tarimu gam atem. Kiddushin daf mem aleph. The Gemara asks Shlichus menolan. How do we know there's a concept of Shlichus? The Gemara brings three sources. We don't have the entire Gemara, just the beginning of this sugya. Gerushin, Truma, and that's this week's parsha, Kein tarimu gam atem, and Shchitas HaPesach. V'shachto oisei kol kahal adas Yisrael. V'chi kol hakol shoichtem, ein shoichet elo echad. 1,000 people can do Shchita together. Mikan sheshlichos shel odem kemoisei. Tosfos Rid asks, to which mitzvahs does Shlichus apply, and to which mitzvahs does Shlichus not apply? Source number 2 on our sheet, Yesh Makshim, Im Kein, Lekol Dvar Mitzvah, Yohel HaShliach, V'yomer Odem L'chaveiro Yishev B'sukkah Ba'avuri, Hanach Tfilin Ba'avuri. Person has a very busy day, and he doesn't have time to put on tefillin. Could he make a shliach? Put on tefillin for me. It's ridiculous. So why could he make a shliach lamul es benoi, to circumcise his child, and he can't make a shliach to sit in the sukkah or to put on tefillin? Tosfos Rid says, Lav milsi, shamitzvah shechai v'yamokom lases begufoi, ha'ech yepoter hu al yedei shlicho. So many achronim understand that the Tosfos Rid means to say there's a certain category, certain type of mitzvah which is defined the mitzvah shebegufoi. A mitzvah that a person needs to perform actually with his own body, and therefore shlichus wouldn't apply. So tefillin is a mitzvah shebegufoi. The difficulty is, how do we determine which mitzvahs would be defined as a mitzvah shebegufoi, and which mitzvahs not necessarily about your hands or your feet or your shoulder or your body, just things got to be done. Chtsois HaChoshen, Chassam Sofer, and many other great achronim deal with this question. Some Sofer, which is source number 4, is somewhat of a surprise, and the Chassam Sofer says, Shlichus would apply to every mitzvah, unless there is a gzeres hakosev that Shlichus does not apply. For instance, tefillin, some Sofer says, ukshartem, shetei kshira lechol echod ve'echod. Does anybody remember about Sfiras Woimer? Usfartem lechem shetehei sfira lechol echod ve'echod. That's the Gemara Menachos Amar Vov. So the Chassam Sofer, right in the middle of this paragraph, Ma shehiksha mitfilin, he deals with the Tosfos Rid. What he asks from tefillin, man leimalan dehosam nami, lav mevikshartem de parsha shniya nafkalan, de nimsa besegol. First parsha of Kriyas Shema says ukshartam. Second parsha is ukshartem. Sheitei kshira lechol echod. Ve'i lo yikro, if not the posek, have sagi b'kshira achas likulam. So, the Chassam Sofer argues, Shlichus will apply to every mitzvah, unless it's gzeres hakosev. which is a bit strange. So why is there no shlichus by achilas matzah, or achilas morer, or davening? Achile definitely is a maisa. Chsam Sofer Simarei Shalaf, source number 6, has a different opinion, and in this tshuva he says, mitzvah shebegufoi, following the footsteps of the Tosfos Rid. So there are 3 tshuvas Chsam Sofer, 4, 6, 7, which contradict each other. Ktsos HaChoshen, source number 3, 5, which contradict each other. So let me briefly share with you my mahalach and shlichus b'mitzvahs. So you know, Jews, when they are required to answer a question, they usually start with another question. So there's a person that had a very difficult life. Shalom Eida. Kodesh Baruch Hu shall only give us good health and simchas. He had many struggles and many nisyonis, and he has difficulty in the midst of Ahavas Hashem. But he really wants to be a good Jew. So he says, I have a neighbor learning in Koilel. He's a great guy. He's my shliach to love HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You know, he loves HaKadosh Baruch Hu for me. Does that sound logical? And there's another guy that has even a bigger problem. He says, I was exposed to some awful material, and I have sveikus and emunah. I'm struggling. But I know a great koilel guy, and I pay him $1,000 a month, and he's my shliach to believe in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So many of you are smiling, because what I just said sounds ridiculous. But to me, just like there could be no shlichus in emunas hayichud, you can't make a shliach to love HaKadosh Baruch Hu or to fear HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It is just as simple. You can't make a shliach to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's just the same. Can't make a shliach for avodas ukeil. V'atu Yisrael, mo Hashem Elokecho shoel mi'imcha. What does HaKadosh Baruch Hu want? Ki im lahavos Hashem Elokecho u'la'avdoi b'chol avavchem. And just like each and every Jew needs to believe in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, love HaKadosh Baruch Hu, be in awe of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, each and every Jew needs to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu. How could there be shlichus and avodas ukeil? How do we define avodas ukeil? Fundamentally, I explained many times, and I think more than once we discussed this in yeshiva, right here. There are 2 different categories of mitzvahs asay. Some mitzvahs asay are just to achieve a result, to achieve an outcome. For instance, v'osiso maka legagecha. Person has a house and he wants to use the roof, but it's putting lives in jeopardy. So he needs to build a makkah, a fence. Nobody should fall off his roof. That is a mitzvah. But it is not essentially avodas ukeil. It's not about the act of building. It's about the result. We don't want anybody to fall off their roof and get killed. There are other mitzvahs which have no result. They're all about avodas ukeil. So let me share with you a gewaldige chiddush that nobody ever said before, but to me it seems to be so poshut. The Rambam writes in the first halacha in Hilchos Tefillah, chayav odom lespalal b'kol yom. The Kesef Mishnah and the Lechem Mishnah both struggle. How does the Rambam know that mitzvah tefillah is b'kol yom? How do we know there's a mitzvah to daven? Tanas of Beis Medalef, va'avadatem es Hashem Elokechem, la'ovdei b'chol avavchem, ezo avodah shebelev zu tefillah. But where does the Pasuk say b'kol yom? The Rambam also writes, Proti ha-mitzvah Hilchos Tefillah, chayovem ha-koyanim lavorech es Yisrael b'kol yom. How do we know b'kol yom? Daber el Harav el Bonav, v'yomartu alehem, koi savachu es b'nei Yisrael, omer lehem, How do we know b'kol yom? All the achronim maintain tefillin is b'kol yom. Who says b'kol yom? How do we know b'kol yom? How do we know that these mitzvahs apply to every day? I think the answer is so pushed. All the mitzvahs that are essentially avodas ukeil, in their very essence, these mitzvahs are not to achieve an outcome, but this is the way a yid is oved as Hashem. All these mitzvahs are either associated with Shabbos and Moed, and if not, Seder Hayom. Goes without saying, we don't even need a source. It's so push-it, it's so simple. Because the reason we're here is to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And the routine of a Jew is a routine of Avodas Hashem. You get up in the morning, Kriyas Shema Shachris. You go to sleep at night, Kriyas Shema Shalarvis. Mea Brochas B'Kol Yom. 3 tefillas every day. Tefillin and tzitzis. And then, Shabbos and Moyadim. That's the backbone. That is the essence of Avodas Ukeil. All the other mitzvahs, without exception, all the others are about the result, about the outcome. So, I don't think we need a source. How do we know tefillah is b'kol yom? Because tefillah is avodas ukeil. The Torah doesn't need to say tefillah is b'kol yom. It goes without saying. We were born to daven. We were born to learn. We were born to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And all the mitzvahs that are in essence avodas ukeil are either Seder Hayom or Shabbos and Moed. Stage number 2. All the mitzvahs that are avodas Hashem, shlichus would never apply. Just as every sensible person understands, you can't make a shliach to love HaKadosh Baruch Hu. How could you make a shliach to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu? It's the same, exactly the same. So Yisachoshin has his mahalach, some say for his, and the Minchas Osha says it's very poshut. Just like there is no shlichus for Avos Hashem, for Emunah, for Yira, there could be no shlichus for Avodah. Shlichus would only apply to mitzvahs that are about the outcome. That is where shlichus is relevant. There could be no shlichus for avodas ukeil. And all the mitzvahs of Seder Hayom are essentially avodas ukeil. And that too makes so much sense. The Torah doesn't need to say every day. It goes without saying. Person gets up in the morning. Why did HaKadosh Baruch Hu give him his neshama? I want your service. This is why you're around. So all the mitzvahs of Seder Yom Shabbos Moed are avodas Hashem. All the mitzvahs of avodas Hashem are Seder Yom Shabbos Moed. Goes both ways. And all the other mitzvahs are about the result. But now we have another question. Mitzvahs that are all about the result, we don't even need shlichus. It's not on our sheet. Now there's a Machne Ephraim, Hilchos Shluchim, Siman Yud Aleph. Machne Ephraim says a gewaldige chiddush. Person can have a non-Jew building a makkah on his roof, and the Jew, the Sholeach, will make the bracha. How could that be? Ein shlichus lenachri. If ein shlichus lenachri, you're not doing anything. How could you make a bracha? Machne Ephraim says, you don't need shlichus, because it's all about the result. At the end of the day, you're responsible to have a makkah. What's the difference? Who made it? Then how could I make the bracha if I'm not doing anything? And there is no shlichus lenachri. Machne Ephraim quotes a Rashba by Tfilas Kelim. The Rashba says, you could have a goy toivel your kelim. And the Pri Chodesh says in Yoredei Kuf Chof, these are my kelim. A goy does the tefillah and I say the bracha. Same question. How could I make a bracha if there's no shlichus lenachri? Pichodesh says the same argument. What's the difference who does the actual tefillah? It's all about the result. There's an amazing Magen Avraham, Reish Samach Gimel Sif Kotten Yud Aleph. Once it was customary to have chuppahs Friday afternoon. So a woman goes to the chuppah. By the time the chuppah is going to be over, it's going to be after the shkia. And she doesn't want to accept an early Shabbos. Maybe she wants to drive to the chuppah. So the Magen Avraham says there are two options. She could light candles before leaving to the chuppah without a bracha. After the chuppah, she'll cover her eyes and say the bracha. Option number two, have a goy put on the candles and she will say the bracha. And Rabbi Kiva Eiger on the spot asks, Ein shlichus l'nochi? How could a Jewish woman say a bracha when a non-Jew is lighting the candles? Obviously, the Magen Avraham would say, it's all about the result. Ner Shabbos is Sholem Bayis, Kvoid Shabbos, Soinik Shabbos. What's the difference who's lighting the candles? But Rabbi Kiva Eiger says, no, En Shlichus L'Goy. So my question is there b'chlal a concept of Shlichus b'mitzvahs? Mima nafshach. If the essence of the mitzvah is the actual act, it's avodas Hashem, there is no shlichus. If the essence of the mitzvah is the result, you don't need shlichus. So maybe there's no such a thing as shlichus b'mitzvahs. Could that be? Could anybody prove that cannot be? There definitely is a concept of shlichus b'mitzvahs. How do we know? Which Gemara? Which one? So there are two different types. Shlichus is relevant to a chalois. Gerushin is a chalois. Trum is a chalois. But what about Shchitas HaPesach? We learn Shlichus from Shchitas HaPesach. That's a mitzvah. And therefore, what I mean to say is, there are not two categories of mitzvahs to say, but rather three. Three categories. On the end, on the extremes of the spectrum, the two that I mentioned before. Some mitzvahs have no outcome. It's nothing about the outcome. It's about avodas Hashem, the purest form of avodas ukeil. And those are all the mitzvahs of Seder Hayom, Shabbos, v'Moyed. On the other end of the spectrum, there are mitzvahs that are all about the result. And the actual deed has nothing to do with avodas Hashem, like Binyan Ma'aka, Tvilas Kalim. The most striking example would be source number 9, Tshuvas Arashbo, Shinun Zayin. Second paragraph. Chayed Amar Shekein Ani Savur, Sheyachoinen Beis Den Atzavas Lagoy, Lizrak Psila Latoch Piv, She'ein Agoy Ele Shluchoy Shel Beis Den, Ve'ein Mises Beis Den Tzurach Gufoy Shel Beis Den. The Rashba says, theoretically, Beis Din could be Makayim Dalas Mises Beis Den even on Shabbos. And the guy will actually do the killing. Doesn't sound right to have a guy killing a Jew for Jews. Doesn't sound right. Never happened. And the Rashba isn't talking Halacha L'Maisa. The Rashba is just theoretical. And he says, Beis Din could be Makayim their mitzvah, uve'arto horo mikirbechu with a goy. And why is that? Shein mises Beis Din tzurach gufoy shel Beis Din. So from this Rashba we learn, when it's all about the result, you don't need shlichus. And we don't care whether the shlich is a goy or a Jew. So let me tell you a story. Never happened. Lo hoya v'lo nivra ve'enoi ela moshel, but it's a powerful mashal. There's this guy that tried to have parnosa. He tried to be a Rosh Hashiva, he failed. He tried to be a Rav, he failed. He tried to be a hedge fund manager, and he failed. At the end of the day, he ended up with a strange job. He executes people, Chayve Mises Beis Din. and he specializes in the job. He calls his wife one day and he says, for the past 2 weeks, I'm just sitting in my office and saying Tillim all day. I have nothing to do. I finish Tillim twice a day. I'm going out of my mind. He says, I'm here to do a mitzvah. Then one day he calls his wife, you won't believe what an amazing day. I arrived in the office in the morning and there was a note pasted on my door from the outside. Today, 2 skila, 3 hereg, 1 chenik, 4 sreifa, 9 mitzvahs in one day. What a beautiful day. I would fire the guy without severance. Crazy man. This is a mitzvah you need to perform with a broken heart. What, are you happy? Wouldn't it be better to say Tillim all day? And he says, I don't understand. I remember that Rambam writes at the end of Hilchos Lulav, Hasimcha sheyismach ha'odam b'asiyas ha'mitzvahs avoda gedola hi, v'kol ha'monea atzmo misimcha zu ra'ui lehiporei mimeno, שנאמר תחת אשר לא יאבד את עושה השם אלוקיך בשמחה ובטוב לבב. Ain't they supposed to be happy that I'm doing mitzvahs? And we say, crazy man, it depends which mitzvahs. They're not all the same. The Rambam writes about lulav. Lulav semachtu lefnei Hashem elokecho. Shabbos with simcha, Krishma b'simcha, matzah with simcha. But when the Sanhedrin judges a person and the verdict is chai v'mises, they fast that day. They cannot eat. So this is a mitzvah you need to perform with a broken heart. You need to cry, not laugh. So there's a difference between one mitzvah and the other. So this is the most powerful example. Dalet mitzvahs is not about avodas ukeil. Killing a Jew is not avodas ukeil. It's about the result. Some people don't deserve to live. But it's all about the result. So when a mitzvah is all about the result, we don't need shlichus. When it's all about avodas Hashem, there is no shlichus. But there is a category in the middle. And those are many mitzvahs that are a combination. It's about the result. But the actual act is an act of kedusha, of avodas Hashem, of profound holiness. And the greatest example would be Milas Haben. It's about the result. Every Jew needs to be chosen ba'ois bris kodesh. The Beis Halevi in Siman Mem Zayin argues that the ikar mitzvah of Milah is the result, ois bris kodesh, but every sensible person understands that the actual act is Kodesh Kodeshim. The Medrash says in Parshas Lech Lecha, a father that smal his son is kekoyen godel hamakar of korban al gabe hamizbeach. In a way, that is like your personal Akedas Yitzchak. So I've been a Sandik hundreds of times, and every time I am moved. Sometimes I'm moved to tears, holding the little baby on your lap, and a father is shedding blood. He's cutting the flesh of his newborn child. That's an act of Mesiras Nefesh. It's not to be taken for granted. That's an act of Mesiras Nefesh. And hearing the baby crying and seeing the blood. So Milah is a combination. Yes, it's about the result, but it's about the act as well. And in those mitzvahs, you need shlichus, and shlichus applies. The other example would be avodas hakorbanos. Yes, korbanos are about the result. Every korban is mechaper, every korban is meratza, but beyond doubt, avodas hakoyanim, hakdoshim bebeis hamikdash, that's an act of kedusha. Machshava poseles. If you have a bad machshava, the korban is posel. You need to be a kohen, as zar as posel. So yes, we learn shlichus from V'shachto oiseh kol kahal hadas Yisrael. So there's a category of mitzvahs which is a combination. It is about the result, but not only about the result. The act is also an act of kedusha. It is an act of significance. It is an act that does have avodas Hashem. It's not Seder Hayom. It's not your routine. but it's a combination of Teitzoah and Pu'ula. And in that middle category, Shlichus applies, and you need Shlichus. And you can't perform these mitzvahs with a person that is not a Shaliach. So in my opinion, there are 3 different types and 3 different categories in mitzvahs, and not only 2. In Shin Pei Beis in Choshen Mishpat, there's a machlokes where the Shlichus applies to Milah. The Shach says, if a person could mal his child, he's not allowed to give it over to someone else. Shlichus doesn't apply to Milah. And the Ksais agrees with the Shach. And the Ksais in Shin Pei Beis says, it's a mitzvah shebegufoi. Why? Why would that be a mitzvah shebegufoi? The Ramah maintains, of course, the Shlichus by Milah Saben, and that's Minakol Oilam Kuloi. It's hard to understand the Shach. The Shach says, if a father could mal himself, he's not allowed to give it for another. What do you mean, if he could be mal? Why doesn't he need to learn to do Milah? If this is his chiyuv, and he can't be yotzeh by anyone else, what do you mean, if he could? Everyone could learn. So b'doichak we need to say, how do I know I'm going to have a baby boy? Maybe I'm not going to have a boy, maybe it's a girl, so I'm not mechuyev to take a course if maybe it might be relevant. And when my baby is born, it's a bit too late now to start learning Milah. So in the modern day and age, when in the 2nd month of pregnancy you already were aware that you're going to have a baby boy, and you have 7 months to prepare, would we say, according to the Shach and the Ktsois, you're not allowed to have a moil? It's your mitzvah, and you can't be mekayim by others. So the way I see it, the Ramah is right. Of course, Shlichus applies. Milah is one of those mitzvahs which is a combination of Maisa and Teitzoah. Just like Shchitas HaPesach and Avodas HaKorbanos. And in these mitzvahs, you need a Shliach, but Shlichus applies. Shlichus is relevant. So we have 3 different klolim. Many mitzvahs Shlichus doesn't apply, and those are the mitzvahs which are the essence of Avodas Hashem, the Jewish routine. And that is Tefillin, Tzitzis, Tefillah Kriyas Shema, Me'ah Brochas B'Kol Yom, Kedusha V'Avdalta, Matzah and Morah, Sukkah and Lulav. All the mitzvahs of Seder Yom Shabbos and Moed. The other extreme of the spectrum is mitzvahs in which the actual deed is not Avodas Hashem. It's all about the result. You don't need Shlichus. But then there's a category in which you need, and Shlichus will apply. Let me make a comment which I think is extremely important. When I say some mitzvahs are Avodas Hashem, does that imply that other mitzvahs are not Avodas Hashem? No. Every mitzvah is Avodas Hashem. However, I'm going to share with you a Haggadah, which is a gewaldige Haggadah. I can't say it in English. After all, the Sprach of Torah is Lashon HaKodesh. There are mitzvahs that we need to do because they're Avodas Hashem. There are other mitzvahs that are Avodas Hashem because they're a mitzvah. Yesh mitzvahs shenitztaveinu behem mipnei sheyesh b'hem avodas ukeil. Yesh mitzvahs sheyesh b'hem avodas ukeil mishum shenitztaveinu behem. After HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, "V'osiso maka legagecha," binyan hamaka becomes Avodas Hashem, and therefore we can say, "Asher kiddushanu b'mitzvosav v'tzivanu." Tvilas Kelim. After HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave a mitzvah of Tvilas Kelim, we say, "Asher kiddushanu b'mitzvosav v'tzivanu." Any mitzvah is Avodas Hashem, because by performing the mitzvah, you're doing Ritzayin Hashem. You're mekayim a mitzvah. But some mitzvahs, Kodesh Baruch Hu gave us because, in essence, they are Avodas Hashem. And the reason we have these mitzvahs is because they're Avodas Hashem. Other mitzvahs are Avodas Hashem because we have the mitzvahs. And that is the huge difference between the different categories. Kach nerelani is daiti in this big sugya of shlichus b'mitzvahs. So this week's Parsha is Parshas Koirach. Parshas Koirach is all about machlokes. And Rashi writes, Kama kosha onsha machlokes, how horrible machlokes is. Beis Din Shalmata don't judge people unless they're 20 years old. Beis Din Shalmata, 13. Bavoina machlokes afataf nispim. Even children pay the price. And on the other hand, lo motzu HaKadosh Baruch Hu kli machzik brocha li Yisrael hiyomähשחור. And we need to go to the extreme to prevent machlokes. Gittin Lamed Vav, Sechet Yevamis Peites. Hanelovim ve'einam oilvin, shomach harposan ve'einam ashivim. People that stare away from machlokes, aleim hakos avoimah. The Srus Yankov says a beautiful pshat. He wasn't aware that the Toises Sarash and the Meiri, the Rishonim, say the sprout before him. Those that are shamed and they do not respond. They won't hurt other people, even though others hurt them. What does that have to do with Tzeis Shemesh Bigvirosai? Do you know what was the first Din Torah in history? The first Din Torah in history was between a claimant and a defendant. Who were they? The moon and the sun. So in Sheishes Yemei Bereishis, Chazal say that the moon came with an argument before HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and he said, Ein shnei melochem mishtamshem bekesarecha. Two kings can't share the same crown. Two kings can't share the same throne. It's either me or him. Really. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu invites the sun to this Din Torah. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu, HaShoifet Kol HaOretz, turns and he asks, who's the claimant? The moon lifts his hand. So what's the story? The judge asks, the Kodesh Baruch Hu asks, and the moon says, how could two kings share one crown? Kodesh Baruch Hu turns to the sun, what do you say? The Gemara doesn't say what the sun said. Obviously, he said nothing. He was minan alavim ve'einam alvin. Shamach haposan ve'einam eshivin. What did HaKadosh Baruch Hu do? What was the verdict? Higdal es hashemesh ve'mi'et es hayoreach. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu promises, if you're attacked, if you're shamed, if you are hurt, and you won't respond, I will take care of you, says HaKadosh Baruch Hu. V'ohavav ketzeis hashemesh bigvirosai. So I do want to share with you something I just imagine. I don't have any source, but I use my imagination. So what happened when HaKadosh Baruch Hu turns to the sun? What do you say? The sun says, about what? Why was I called here? What am I doing here? I don't get it. I don't understand what's going on. HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells the sun, you didn't hear the claim? Two kings can't share the same crown. And the son is puzzled, and he asks, who are the two kings? Who are the kings? I don't see any kings here. He and you. And the son starts laughing. I'm a king? What is he, crazy? I'm a king? I'm a servant. The son says, how am I a king? The Navi says, Va'anachnu oisem b'malocha, mi'aloisa shachar ad seisa krechovim. So the son says, the entire world sleeps and they get up, mi'aloisa shachar. I need to be up earlier. I need to prepare my journey. I'm a servant. I'm not a king. I never saw myself as a king. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, you are a king. That is kingship. That is malchus. That is a Jewish king. That's what Jewish kings are about. And that is an Elovim v'Einam Alvin. The son says, what is he talking about? Who are the kings here? I don't see any kings. I thought I'm a servant. I thought I'm an Eved. And he thinks he's a Melech. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, you are the one. So we need to steer away from machlokes. And my pshat, what is a kli machzik brocha? In the modern world, when you buy drinks, the drinks come in bottles. But in the days of the Mishnah of the Gemara, we see that people used to bring bottles and vessels from home, and the shop owner, the mozeg, used to pour whatever you want to buy into your own kelim. Zeh ba bekadoi, zeh ba bechavitoi. So a person won the lottery, and suddenly he's flush with money. He comes to the shop owner and he says, I want yayin hamishumar and shemen afar saman, the best you have in the market, the most expensive wine and the best oil. The shop owner is happy. Wow, what a day. But he peeks into the vessels of his client and he says, look, your kli is cracked. To me, it's great. By the time you get home, you'll have nothing. And it's going to drip all the way. And you're going to come back again and again. And I'm going to be making a lot of money. But chaval, chaval. Your vessels are cracked. Go home and bring proper bottles. Otherwise, you're going to be left with nothing. Kodesh Baruch Hu, please with us, Kendalach. I love you. And I am mashpia. Shefa Elokim emarom. I want to give you bona, chaya, mezoina, ravicha. But please, don't come with broken kelim. By the time you get home, nothing will be left. Lo imotzu HaKadosh Baruch Hu kli machzik brocha liyisrael ela hashalom. If we should be able to accept all the brochas HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants to bestow upon us, all he requires, all he is asking for is shalom. I think hundreds of times in the past 9 months, I've been quoting a posik in Parshas Bechukoisai, pleading with the Kodesh Baruch Hu, "V'natati shalom ba'oretz u'shchaftem ve'ein machrid." There's an amazing Ibn Ezra on this posik. So Poshet Pshat is, Kodesh Baruch Hu should bless us with peace, and all the Arabs should drop dead, and all our enemies should be gone, and there should be peace in Eretz Yisrael. That the Ibn Ezra says, "V'natati shalom ba'oretz beinechem u'shechaftem ve'ein machrid." V'natati shalom ba'oretz, one word, beinechem. You should have shalom amongst yourselves. And there should be no more sinas chinam and sinas achem. And there should be peace amongst our people. And then HaKadosh Baruch Hu promises, u'shchaftem ve'ein machrid. And each and every individual and communities need to stay away from achloikis and only be marba ahava ve'achva ve'shalom ve'reyes, and then we will be zoichu u'shchaftem ve'ein machrid. Kodesh Baruch Hu yishlach lanu Moshiach tzidkenu b'mheiro v'yomeinu amen.